Okay, so for today's lecture, we will be talking about the respiratory system. Okay, so for the respiratory system, the major tissue types that are present in it would be all, just like your integumentary system that we talked about in our previous lecture. In the respiratory system, we would expect that all the four major types of tissues are present. Of course, we will be needing the epithelial tissue because, again, usually it is the epithelial tissue that dictates the primary physiological function of the organ that is a member of a specific organ system. So, in the case of the respiratory system, as we all know, based on our physiology courses and classes, mainly the function of the epithelial tissue in this organ system would be first to bring the air from the outside into the lungs, and in the lungs, a specific part of the lungs, there will be an exchange of gases. So the first part would be what we call the conducting portion, and the second part would be the respiratory portion. Okay, so those are the two main functions of the respiratory system, and we expect that the epithelial tissue lining or serving the areas of the respiratory system would change depending if they are part of the conducting or passageway system or if they are actually functioning for the actual exchange of gases from the air into the blood. Okay. As for the connective tissue, so the connective tissue that is present here in the respiratory system would mostly be your supportive type. But of course, there's also the literal connective tissue proper, which would actually connect the different tissues, layers of tissues with other tissues. But for the supportive, we have our mostly our what? Cartilage type of connective tissue, especially in the more bigger areas that need more support, while as the passageway becomes smaller, it is no longer the cartilage, but it turns into your muscle tissue. Okay, so we will be learning more about that later. And then finally, of course, in order to control the muscle tissue, we would have your nervous tissue. Okay? So, when we think about the respiratory system, the major organ that we are usually thinking of would be our lungs, of course. But again, we have to remember that that is not the whole story. You have to include all the passageways that the air needs to traverse in order to reach the smallest unit of gas exchange or the alveoli. So from the outside, you have to appreciate that, oh, it has to pass the nasal cavity, the pharynx, the larynx before it goes to the trachea and into the lungs. Okay? As such, you would have your upper respiratory tract and your lower respiratory tract. And clinically, a lot of diseases and disorders and physiological disturbances may differ between the two. Okay? All right. So what is the basic structure of the respiratory system? If there is a slide that you would need to master in order to fully understand the idea behind the structure and the physiological function of the respiratory system, it is this slide. So please listen very carefully, okay? So the basic structure of the respiratory system is what? It is basically a series of tubes or pipes, not very unlike your cardiovascular system, right? So again, in order for the air to be brought inside into the lungs, of course, you will need to have an opening or lumen, right? Which means, based on the two major types of architectural types of organs, our respiratory system is what? Parenchymatous or tubular? Of course, it is tubular because as we said, this time, instead of the blood, we are now interested in the passage of air. Okay? So again, tubular. And what happens is the key point is that at first the opening is quite big And then as it goes into the actual area of gas exchange, so we will be talking about a few micrometers thick or small, then you would have the gradual uh, constricting of the lumen. Okay? And here you can see if the portion of the pipeline is quite big, it needs additional connective tissue to support it to maintain that it is open, right? Because it's big. So you would have the presence of your cartilages. And these cartilages in the bigger areas such as your trachea and bronchi, it is still quite more extensive. And as it goes into the smaller regions, it will become just separate plates, okay, until it is gone and it is replaced by smooth muscle tissue. Okay, so it makes sense, right? Because if the passageway is so small, then the cartilage will be too big for it. So it's not the best uh, supportive tissue. And of course, in the smaller areas of our respiratory uh, system, sometimes there is a physiological need to constrict and dilate it. And of course, the best tissue to serve that purpose would be your smooth muscle. Okay? So, still stemming from the need to go from big lumen to small lumen, of course, we would also need for the lining epithelium to be thicker and more supportive in the bigger areas and become eventually thinner. Imagine tall columnar pseudostratified, it will become short columnar until it will become shorter and shorter into cuboidal and finally into the flat cells. Okay? The key point is that in the conducting portion, there is no need for it to be very thin. What the structures here need is for enough mechanical support to maintain the integrity of the big lumen to facilitate the passageway of the air. What else? It also needs what? The trapping of possible noxious substances such as bacteria or other debris. So there is the production of some of the cellular components of this respiratory epithelium, the production of mucus. Okay, so we will talk more about that later. And then in the final areas, the epithelium should be very thin because there should be less resistance or area or material for the oxygen in the air to pass into the blood in the capillaries. Okay, so the goal is for the gases to diffuse easily, and for that to happen, the tissue should be very, very thin. Okay, so what is the main function of the respiratory system? So as we said earlier, again, from the conducting to the respiratory part. So the respiratory part is where the actual exchange of the gases occur from the air into the blood and from the blood into the air, right? So gas exchange. And then because of the gas exchange and because carbon dioxide, the byproduct of the after the oxygen has been used up by the body, then it will give off carbon dioxide already. So this carbon dioxide is quite acidic, and the goal is to maintain the acid base balance in the body, so the carbon dioxide should be released. Okay, and if there is a difficulty in the release of this carbon dioxide product, then there will be respiratory acidosis of, or if there is too much release of this carbon dioxide, then maybe there will be respiratory alkalosis. And I hope this will be furthermore discussed in your physiology courses. Okay? And since there is a lot of capillary beds within the lungs, because of course we have to uh, find a way for this blood and the air to be near each other. So there's a lot of blood vessels in the form of capillaries. So it is also in a way serving as a blood reservoir. And then, of course, again, in connection with the maintenance of the acid-base balance that we mentioned before, the respiratory system also functions mainly for the metabolism. Okay? And of course, especially in the more rostral initial parts of the conducting portion, especially in the nasal area, you would have the olfaction, which is basically, again, some form of processing and detecting external stimuli. And this time it would be the sense of smell. Okay? So, again, this is also the function of your respiratory system. And it also functions in the activation of defense mechanisms as needed. Okay, for the defense system, it can be mechanical, again, in the form of the trapping of your particulate matter, bacteria, and other stuff in the mucus produced by the goblet cells lining the conducting portion of your respiratory system. Or it may also be in the form of your immune defense because, of course, the deeper layers or the lamina propria of your, especially in the conducting portion, you would have your immune cells. Okay? So how does the respiratory system develop? The respiratory system is one of the quite special organ systems because um, all the three germ layers are present or they contribute to the formation of the different areas of this organ system. So a lot of the parts of the organ system, some of it will come from the surface exoderm part and also the branchial arches as well. Okay, so here you would see that the branchial arches would form the supportive structures that usually keep the upper respiratory tract open and able to conduct air. Okay, and for the lung area, what we would like to appreciate, it's composed of your splanchnic mesoderm, which will give an outpocketing in the ventral area. So here, and this would form eventually the buds. And as it becomes complicated, the key information here is that the esophagus and the trachea, they come from a single tube at the start. And then eventually, they would divide into the dorsal and ventral area. Such that if there is a failure for the division to occur, you would have your tracheoesophageal fistula, which is a developmental anomaly in some animals. Okay? Anyway, so after it has closed and you have a separate esophagus from trachea, you would have the eventual extension and division of the bronchus, the bronchial buds. Okay, and actually, these divisions of your bronchial buds, they are the ones that would actually dictate the lobular structure of the animal. Okay, and the basic lobular structure is that the left side usually would have a cranial and a caudal, while the right side can be divided into the upper, middle, and lower. But again, it depends on the specific species. And some species would even have a bronchi that comes off from the initial part of the trachea. I think that's for the pig and the horse. So, of course, that's a matter that is usually tested or discussed more in your gross anatomy subject. Okay, so this is what I was telling you earlier. The foregut is actually where your respiratory system develops. It develops as a ventral tube that eventually pinches itself off until it becomes a separate structure altogether. Which means we have to appreciate that the lining epithelium of your respiratory system will come from the yellow germ layer, your endoderm, while all the other supporting structures such as your cartilage, your lamina propria, connective tissue, submucosal connective tissue, the smooth muscles, they will come from the surrounding mesoderm, specifically your splanchnic mesoderm. Okay? So, again, the outbucketings will dictate the lobation. And if we go more into zoom and magnification, we would see the development first of the alveoli, and then what happens is that it will become more complicated and bigger, thus forming the complicated branch-like pattern. Okay? And here you can see, as what I said earlier, the lobation is quite different depending on the specific animal. And here you would see the left side is usually more simpler, while the right side is more complicated, and that some animals would have your tracheal bronchus, such as in your bovine and your porcine. Sorry, it was bovine instead of horse. Okay, so um, again, you would have your conducting portion, and in deeper areas within the quote unquote meat of the lungs, that is where you would uh, see your alveoli, where the actual gas exchange occurs. Again, the respiratory system is quite special, just like your integumentary system, because the three germ layers, the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm, go hand in hand. They cooperate and produce all the different puzzle pieces that make up the layers and substructures of your respiratory system organs. Okay? All right. So for the structure of the respiratory system, at least in the mammalian context, so again, we have the rostral portion, the nasal cavity area, and then from the nasal cavity area, you would have your pharynx, and then your larynx, and then your trachea, and from the trachea, you would have your bronchus, and then your bronchi, and then your bronchiole, and then from the bronchiole, you would have your alveolar ducts, alveolar sacs, and finally, your individual alveolus, and collectively plural form alveoli. Okay? And again, you would see here that for the initial portions, especially the areas which are very near the external surroundings and still need to be prepared for possible mechanical stress from the outside world, we would expect that the lining epithelium would be like that of your skin. Okay? So you would have your stratified squamous epithelium that would be resistant to abrasion, especially in the external nares part and this area. And then as we go deeper, we would turn into your respiratory epithelium, which is technically your pseudostratified columnar epithelium with goblet cells to produce the mucus, as well as your ciliated cells, which would help in propelling the mucus outside, especially if there is a need to propel trapped debris out. Okay, and then as you go deeper and deeper into the smaller parts, this tall respiratory epithelium will become shorter and shorter until it becomes flat. Okay, so in the conducting area, in the nasal cavity area, so again, in the first part, you have your stratified squamous epithelium, but as you go deeper, the function is to what we said earlier, to smell things, right? So the olfaction system, since it is a substance that needs to be detected and received by your nervous system, and then eventually, once it is received by your nervous system, the brain will then analyze what kind of smell it is and dictate to the animal what its behavior should be responding to that stimuli. Okay? But first, what you have to appreciate is that in order to do that, the epithelium should also change, and the epithelium should contain these neuron cells. Okay? Again, here again, this is a very, very important slide to appreciate, especially in the context of the part of the respiratory system that does not need to smell. No olfactory function is quite simple, and the normal respiratory epithelium is just your normal pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Again, pseudostratified because what? It looks as if there's multiple layers, but actually there's not. What happens is that some cells are only in the basement area. That would be your basal cells. These basal cells, again, usually when we have basal cells in any lining epithelium, their purpose is to be the stem cells, or the cells that would eventually replace the mature cells that are found in the more superficial layers. Then, of course, you have your other cells that reach to the surface, the ciliated cells, and of course, the goblet cells. Okay, so these goblet cells usually It is the primary defense of the conducting part. If there is a need to remove a big amount of particulate matter, then there would be the need to produce more mucosa, and such more goblet cells will be developing from your basal cells. Okay? So that's the normal one. But if there is a need to eventually detect um, smell or odor, then you would have to add the addition of your olfactory cells here. Okay, these olfactory cells, they are actually bipolar neurons. Okay, so this is it. So in the normal respiratory epithelium, you have the basal cell, you have your secretory cells, you have your goblet cell, you have your brush cells, and also your ciliated cells. Okay, so the brush cells usually they function both in increasing the surface area and if there is a need to reabsorb some of the mucus, while the ciliated cells they are there in order to help propel the mucus produced by the goblet cells. Okay, again there is no um, neurons here, so this is just for respiratory normal. But for the olfactory type, it is thicker because you would have your olfactory sensory neurons. And this is the key point, no? Imagine this epithelium would have the actual neurons embedded in it, which means the transfer of olfactory information or stimuli would be very direct because then and there in that epithelium, the stimuli is able to be processed by the neuron and directly transferred to the olfactory bulb of the brain where it is analyzed. Okay? And it's very good because there's a almost instant processing. But the other side of the story is that it is very prone to the attack because it is a very exposed site of noxious stimuli or infectious pathogens that can directly enter the brain because it is also a direct pathway. As such, for animals that are very acute sense of smell, they are also very susceptible to the direct route of pathogen entry into the brain. Okay, so it's like a double-edged sword. Okay, so for the respiratory system, as we said earlier, you have the conducting portion and the respiratory portion. For the conducting portion, the parts are your nasal cavity, your nasopharynx, your larynx, where the voice box is, and then your trachea, your bronchi, which would have your primary, secondary, and tertiary. So as it goes smaller, then you would have your bronchioles. You would have your terminal bronchioles, which is like the last part of the conducting portion, just the passageway. And then it is connected to the respiratory bronchioles, which is the first segment of the respiratory part of the respiratory system. So again, uh, there is a difference. So first part is the conducting. Again, the lining epithelium is different. So the animal has no choice because the conducting area should be structurally able to receive the air. And then the respiratory area, it should be able to be present itself in such a way that there will be efficient diffusion of substances from the air into the blood and vice versa. So for that to happen, the respiratory area should have very thin epithelial lining. But again, the air that will traverse from the air to the blood should be what? Should be warm and clean. So who warms the air and who cleans it? It is the conducting area. Okay, so think about that when you are thinking about the epithelial lining epithelium requirements. Okay? So the respiratory bronchiole, then you would have your alveolar ducts, which will lead into your alveolar sacs, which is composed of multiple alveoli. So actually, it is here in the alveolar where the majority of the gas exchange from the air into the blood and vice versa actually occurs. Okay? So the nasal cavity would have sub areas and what we discussed earlier. So some areas would have your cutaneous region, stratified squamous epithelium. And then the transitional zone where it will transition into your pseudostratified epithelium. So stratified squamous cutaneous region. So this area, usually the cutaneous region, that's the area where it is still safe to touch it. So in our case, in the humans, this is where you touch where the booger is, right? So when you're trying to remove your booger, you're actually touching still your stratified squamous epithelium. And it's not painful because the epithelium is still quite sturdy. But as you go deeper, deep into the transitional zone, the area where you cannot touch anymore, then you would have your stratified cuboidal or columnar epithelium. Okay? And then in the nasal fossae, that's where the respiratory, aka the pseudostratified columnar epithelium with cilia and goblet cells are. Okay? Olfactory epithelium, basically your respiratory epithelium plus your bipolar neuron. So it's quite thick, and this is later we will see where it is usually found. Okay? So again, as we go through the conducting area to the respiratory, please, this is again a very important slide. Try to appreciate the spectrum of the change of lining epithelium from thick until it becomes thin. But an exception is in the larynx because some area of the nasopharynx and larynx may be subjected to food particles, right? So in that case, there should be the stratified squamous epithelium, so thick, sturdy epithelium. And then the respiratory surface is just for the air, okay? So trachea, so tall, columnar, and then it becomes shorter as it goes in the smaller areas, okay? Then, for the respiratory bronchus cuboidal until squamous, and then just squamous. Okay? For the avian, we have nasal cavity, larynx, syrinx. So what happens is the addition of the syrinx. In the mammalian, the vocal cords is in the larynx. In the avian, it is found in the syrinx. That's why when you hear the avian sound, it is deeper and more stronger. And it sounds as if it is coming somewhere deeper, right? Of course, you also have the trachea, the bronchi, and then the smaller regions, you have your primary bronchi, aka your mesobronchi, bronchus, secondary bronchi, which goes into either the air sacs or the tertiary or parabronchi. So the secondary, in the first flow, it would go directly to the posterior air sacs. And in the second flow, the secondary bronchi can go to the parabronchi. And then the parabronchi, you would have your atrium. And then, that's the last part of your conducting portion in the avian. Then, the start of the respiratory portion would be your air capillaries. Okay? So, the nasal cavity histological structures of the avian is similar to mammals. For the larynx, it's simple columnar to cuboidal. For the syrinx, again, it's stratified squamous epithelium, because this is where there is vibration for the vocalization. And again, if there's a mechanical force, you have to be ready for it with a thicker type of epithelium. It is Y-shaped, and for vocalization. For the trachea, it's the same banana as with your mammalian counterpart. But the key difference is that this time, the cartilage component is complete. Okay? Okay, let's go to the nasal cavity of our mammalian. So here, we already discussed this earlier. What I want you to appreciate is that the normal respiratory epithelium is usually found in the middle, more rostral area. And the most rostral part, you would have your stratified squamous because it's still prone to mechanical damage. Middle part, respiratory epithelium, the one that's a little bit more thinner. And the thicker part will be in the deeper part in the ethnoturbinates of your nasal cavity, and it is the one that would have your sensory neurons, and it is directly connected to the olfactory bulb or cortex. Okay? We have actual slides in the laboratory, so I hope the reporting group will be using this slides cross-section taken from the snout. So you can see that the dorsal area would have your thicker olfactory lining epithelium, while the ventral area would have your just respiratory epithelium, and the ones that is connected to the oral cavity would have your stratified squamous epithelium. Okay? We zoom in, you see your respiratory epithelium. And as it goes into the oral epithelium, it will become stratified squamous. Okay? Again, there is a transition from the respiratory to the stratified squamous. And then, another structure here, you would see in the dorsal area, again, this would be your olfactory epithelium with a lot of additional cells, specifically the sensory cells. Okay? And then, aside from this area, you would also have the very specialized vomeronasal organ, which functions in the detection of pheromones, which is a very important factor for the mating and reproductive behavior, especially for the domestic animals. Okay? In humans, it's not as specialized because again, we have developed other ways in order to facilitate our reproductive behavior. Okay? But for animals, the vomeronasal organ is quite special. So as you can see in the vomeronasal organ, it's located near the nasal septum in the more ventral area. And it's like a tube-like structure here, the blue part. And you can see that again, it has a very thick surface which has your olfactory epithelium, and also it would have another surface that is just your respiratory epithelium. So this is really interesting because this time around, the sensory neurons here would be going into the accessory olfactory bulb. Okay, this is quite interesting. Currently, I have a personal study which investigates the cellular components of the olfactory and the respiratory epithelium of the vomeronasal organs of our native animals. So I have a PhD graduate student, so I am his advisor, Dr. Errol Balagan, and his study. Hopefully, in the future, we will be able to update this lecture series to include the findings of that study. So we investigated the histological characteristics of the Philippine Carabao, the Philippine native pig, and the Philippine native goat. Okay, so it's interesting. Okay, for the larynx, again, this is this area. It's quite complicated because this area has a lot of structures, and it is very important for the animals because this is where the voice box is, and this is also where the epiglottis is. So the main function of the epiglottis is to what? To make sure that only air goes into the trachea and that no other particulate matter such as food will enter it. And if that happens, sometimes what happens? That is when the coughing reflex will be uh, activated. Okay? As such, the larynx would have a surface that is ready for the mechanical process of the food, and then there is another surface of it that is for the respiratory function. Okay? Again, there is also the presence here of what? What's this? This is your tonsil. It is a part of your immune system, lymphatic system, and it's basically your mouth mucosal associated. Or if it is located somewhere deeper in the bronchus, it will be your belt. Okay? Anyway, don't forget that, and it is in here in order to catch any possible noxious substances, pathogenic substances that can go into the trachea or into the esophagus. Okay? So if we zoom in here, you would appreciate that there is a need for specialized cartilages, usually your hyaline type of cartilage, so that this area will remain open. Okay? So the cartilages are found in the um, underneath the mucosal layer. The mucosal layer that is composed of your epithelial lining tissue, right? So underneath it, you have your lamina propria and your submucosa. And in some references, they would just consider it as combined. So they will call it your lamina propria dash submucosal layer. Okay? And of course, in some areas, you would have the additional support of your muscle. Okay? So in the trachea, you would have your tall pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Okay? Zoom in. For the mammal, the key point is that the tracheal cartilage ring is incomplete because because there is a need to give way and space for your trachealis muscle. This trachealis muscle is found in the dorsal area of the trachea, the one that is opposed to the esophagus. And its presence there is because there is a need to give way when the esophagus is filled with food bolus, right? It should have a give. So it's able to expand in order to allow the food to pass through. Okay? And later we will learn that in the avian species, it's not like that. Okay? So again, look for the trachealis muscle in order to determine that, this trachea belongs to a mammalian species. What else? Quite interesting is the presence of extensive glands in the lamina propria submucosal layer, in the deeper layers of your trachea, which makes sense because in the trachea there is still a definite need for the production of mucus that is ready to trap any unwanted particulate matter. Okay? So this is your respiratory epithelium. Quite simple. And again, in the level of your trachea, it's not thick anymore because you don't need to put your sensory neurons anymore unless you have the ability to smell in your trachea, which should not be the case. Okay? Again, you have your extensive uh, glandular structures in your beneath your epithelium. Okay, so it is in the lamina propria submucosa. Then in the bronchi, in this area, you would have the less cartilage support because again they are preparing for their disappearance, eventual disappearance and replacement with smooth muscle. But still, if you find this in the sections of your lungs, and there is a cartilage, then you are looking at a section or segment of the bronchus or bronchi. Okay? Here you have, and the more complete and detailed the cartilage, it means you are nearer the outer area. And the more sparse it is, you are nearing the deeper areas. Okay? And then for the bronchioles, here the cartilages become absent. Instead, they are replaced by the elastic fibers as well as the smooth muscle tissue. This in the bronchiole, this is where your uh, there is a physiological capability to constrict or dilate the passageway. So clinically, what? In asthma cases, what happens is that there is something that triggers the smooth muscles of your bronchiole to spasm and constrict. That's why you have a difficulty to breathe. So this also usually happens what? Usually in feline, we have your feline asthma. So again, this would be your bronchioles. And then you would drink medicine, right? That would counteract this one. So those medicines, their pharmacological effect is to relax the smooth muscles surrounding your bronchiole. Okay? This here again, no cartilage inside. Okay? I am looking at a bronchular segment. Okay? Sometimes you would see that if it's still a bronchus and not a bronchiole, you will have your cartilage. And guys, I always remember that the animal is always right because this is a continuous segment. It is very normal for you to see the in-betweens. So the connection of the trachea to the bronchus, the connection of the bronchus to the bronchiole. Okay? So it's very normal. Again, it is not binary. Okay? Now, let's move on to the respiratory part. So, we are expecting a more simple and thinner lining epithelium here. As such, we will go here. In the respiratory bronchiole, you would have your cuboidal epithelium as well as in your terminal bronchiole. So, the cells are becoming shorter. And then in the respiratory bronchiole, the key point is that along its length there you will see the alveoli wherein the lining epithelium becomes your single flat cells or your simple squamous epithelium. And of course, you have the alveolar duct or the common opening of your alveolar sacs, which is basically a cluster of your alveoli. So here, you have your terminal bronchioles, conducting portion, and then the respiratory bronchioles, which could have direct out pocketings of alveoli already, and then your alveolar duct here, and then your alveolar sacs here, and then the individual alveoli within. Again, you have your terminal bronchiole. Again, it's still cuboidal lining epithelium, no gas exchange. But once it goes to your respiratory bronchioles, there will be the presence of your smooth muscle in the lining epithelium and the direct out pocketing of alveoli. And then in some uh, regions, you would have your alveolar duct, which gives off your alveolar sac, which is composed of your cluster of alveoli. Okay? And you can see if there is still the smooth muscle, then you are still in your alveolar duct or respiratory bronchiole. So again, terminal bronchiole no gas exchange, this is still a portion of your conducting area. The respiratory bronchiole, which would have direct out pocketings of alveoli, and then your alveolar duct, which will give off your alveolar sacs, and each alveolar sac which will have your alveoli here, 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 here. Okay, so the alveolar duct, they are basically the common opening of your alveolar sacs. Okay, and the alveolar sac will be the common opening of your alveoli. Okay, if we zoom in more, the walls of your alveoli, again, this is actually where the respiratory function of the respiratory system happens. This is the main site of exchange of the transfer of gases from the air into the blood. Okay, so here you can see that you have your pneumocytes. So you have your flat type 1 pneumocytes and your type 2 pneumocytes, which produces the surfactants. Okay, so between the two, there are more numerous type 2 pneumocytes which composes your alveoli. But majority of the surfaces is still composed of your type 1 pneumocytes. So this makes sense because your type 2 pneumocyte is cuboidal and circular. It doesn't really take up a lot of surface area. So even if it is the more numerous of the type of cell, it is not able to produce an extensive surface area. So that is the function of your type 1 pneumocyte. And in between your type 1 pneumocyte, you would have the endothelial lining of your blood vessels. Okay? Here. So the purpose is for the air in the alveolar lumen, the gases will diffuse into the blood vessels, and then the gases from the blood inside the in the blood vessels, it will go out. So the barrier in between the two substances would actually be the what? The lining epithelium of the alveoli and the lining epithelium or the endothelium of the capillary. So it is very, very thin. That's why the diffusion can take place without much resistance. Okay? So imagine if this is your columnar epithelium, then it's too thick and the diffusion cannot take place efficiently. So again, histology is just physiology visualized. Okay? Okay, for the avian story, for the upper parts of the conducting area, it's just similar to the mammal, ano? But for the larynx, quite similar as well. But this time, we have the addition of your syrinx. Again, this is the area wherein the vocalization happens, as opposed to the mammalian counterpart, where the vocalization happens in the voice box or in the vocal cords of the larynx. Okay? And then for the trachea, same banana, same type of epithelium. But later we will see that there is a quite difference because the glandular component of the avian respiratory system in the trachea is quite different, because instead of being found in the deeper layers of the lamina propria or the submucosa, it is actually found within the epithelium itself. Later we will see that. Okay, and then you would have your bronchi, which would have different names as it goes deeper and deeper and smaller into the lungs. You have your primary bronchi, aka your mesobronchi, your secondary bronchi, which doesn't have another nickname, and the secondary bronchi can go directly into the posterior air sacs or into the tertiary bronchi, aka your parabronchi, and this is connected into the atrium. So the atrium is the last segment of your conducting portion of your avian respiratory system. Once it goes to the air capillaries, then that is the area of the respiratory and actual gas exchange. So, since the bird has a very high respiratory need, right? Because, the birds have to fly long stretches of distance, right? Unlike us mammals, we will just walk and run, and then we will get tired. But unlike birds, the distance that they are able to cover because they can fly, it means their respiratory requirement is so big such that there is a need for the respiratory system to be more efficient. Okay. So they are able to do this by having a unidirectional flow of inspirated air. Okay, and this unidirectional flow uh, is very efficient, and there is a ability to do gas exchange quickly. Okay. So as you can see, the structure of the bronchi, the mesobronchus, and the parabronchus, it's like in a grid-like pattern. And another um, difference of the avian system is that unlike the mammalian lung, wherein the whole lung actually expands and contracts, and the style of flow is tidal, wherein there is a cyclical inspiration. So, inhale, getting of the outside air, and then there will be gas exchange, and then exhale. So that's the one cycle, tidal, right? But in the avian, it's just one continuous. So you don't really see a lot of inhale and exhale in your avian species. Okay? So it is best characterized by the flow of the air. So what happens is first, the inspired air will from the trachea will go into the primary bronchus and then the secondary bronchus directly into the posterior sacs. Okay? Like this. And then in this posterior sac, they will be pumped going into the parabronchi. We go here, where it will eventually lead into the air capillaries and eventually into the blood capillaries, and this is where gas exchange will occur from from oxygenated, it will become oxygenated and vice versa, and then this carbon dioxide filled blood will go into the anterior sacs. Okay, and these anterior sacs, they will be the ones that would pump out the carbon dioxide filled air out back into the trachea. So as you can see, it is unidirectional and more efficient. Okay? So here, see grid-like structure. And again, in the case of the mammalian, the whole lung will contract and expand. In the avian system, they separated that. So the lung doesn't really contract or expand. That is the function, the movement of the air is delegated to the function of the air sacs. Okay? So this is what the avian lung looks like. So for the nasal cavity, you would still have your keratinized epithelium. And what's cute about the avian nasal cavity is that there is this ridge-like formation, but still it is your stratified squamous epithelium. And as what we said earlier, what's special about the respiratory epithelium lining the conducting portion of your avian respiratory system is that the glands are directly seen in the epithelial layer. So, intraepithelial location of the glands and not really in the deeper parts. Okay? Characteristic part. Although, there are also your lamina propria submucosal located glands. Okay? But still, the lining epithelium is your pseudostratified columnar epithelium with goblet cells and cilia. For the trachea, the key point is that there is no trachealis muscle, okay? The cartilaginous rings are complete and they are very sturdy because since the respiratory system of the exchange of gas is so efficient, it needs to constantly make sure that the airway is patent. Okay? And a key feature of the cartilaginous rings is that they are overlapping, right? They look like roof tiles. Okay? So, in the cross section here, you can see a very extensive hyaline cartilage. Still, there is your skeletal muscle support, but it is not located within the actual layer, right? Unlike in your mammalian counterpart. And again, you would have your pseudostratified epithelium and the presence of your intraepithelial glands, which is a characteristic of your avian respiratory system. Okay? Intraepithelial glands. For the syrinx, this area, this is again where the vocalization happens. Okay? And a key characteristic of this area is that when you zoom in, it is not just your cartilage, but what? It looks like your bone tissue. And what type of bone tissue is this? It would be your what? It has trabecular spaces, your spongy bone. For majority of the bones of the avian species, there is a need for it to be hollow so that it will be lighter and it would facilitate a lighter body weight. And for the avian species that has a need to fly, then the bones should be lighter. Okay? And then the surfaces are still uh, stratified squamous because if it is the syrinx, then a portion of it would be vibrating in order to make the noise. And if there is vibration, there is a need to protect itself from mechanical damage. Then, for the bronchi and air capillaries, again, here you would see the air sacs. Okay, so it means the air sac is also prone to the particulate matter. So, in the avian species, usually the health of the respiratory system can be damaged if there is a damage or the intrusion of pathogenic substances into the capillaries. Into the air sacs. This air sacs is made up of a very thin membrane here. So histologically, it is just composed of either cuboidal cells or squamous cells with a very thin, uh, irregular connective tissue. So there's your collagen fibers in it. Okay? And then for the mesobronchus, secondary bronchus, and the parabronchus. So basically, the idea is you would have your simple squamous epithelium. So here is the parabronchus, and here are your air ventricles, and these ventricles or vesicles. And here you would have your air capillaries intimately fused with your blood capillaries. So again, there is a very thin amount of tissue that divides your air and your blood. As such, there is a very easy diffusion of gases from the air into the blood and vice versa. Okay? So again, you have your uh, air vesicles, and then your air capillaries. And if you see the nucleated RBCs within it, then that would be your blood capillaries. So that's all for today's topic. Please do not forget to sign the attendance form. Again, if only if you are a member of school year Beta 106, school year 2026-2027. And if you are someone from the future, please make sure that you will be logging into the attendance tracker of your current semester. Okay? And of course, we have our online quiz later. Online quiz, seventh quiz at 9 p.m. So please make sure that your notification for your Google Classroom is activated. So that's all for today's topic.